We love them for their Oscar-worthy performances, diva musicianship, and humanitarian work. Now it's time to visit the final resting places of these stars of the 1960s. John Wayne was already famous before the 60s, but the decade saw the release of some of his biggest films, including his only Oscar-winning role in 1969's True Grit. When he died in 1979, he wasn't exactly given the send-off you'd expect for such an icon. Instead, a small private funeral was held, and he was buried in an unmarked grave. As his son Ethan explained to the Los Angeles Times, "You want him to rest in peace. We didn't want to make a shrine. It's more out of respect for the people that are out there. They don't want their loved ones' graves trampled on." It took almost 20 years before the Wayne family felt comfortable marking the location. The actor is buried at Pacific View Memorial Park in Corona del Mar, California. His small, flat gravestone is easy to miss, but once you see it, it's quintessentially John Wayne. A lasso borders a relief of a Spanish mission and a view reminiscent of the desert in the Southwest. There's a cowboy on a horse, presumably Wayne himself, and the epitaph reads, "Tomorrow is the most important thing in life. Comes into us at midnight very clean. It's perfect when it arrives, and it puts itself in our hands. It hopes we've learned something from yesterday." Jimi Hendrix's music defined the late 60s, with an electric closing act performance at Woodstock among his most iconic moments. When he died in London at the age of 27 in 1970, it was a shock and a tragedy. His body was flown back to his hometown of Seattle for burial. Originally, his family had wanted a large public service complete with bands performing, but in the end, they opted for a small private ceremony. Hendrix is buried at Greenwood Memorial Park in Renton, Washington, in a final resting place befitting a rock legend. It didn't start out that way though, as his original gravesite in the cemetery is marked by a simple plaque. But now, his grave is unmissable thanks to a large marble gazebo. 3 sides are etched with portraits of Hendrix and lyrics from his songs, and more recently, a large sculpture of a guitar was placed in the center of the gazebo. Natalie Wood starred in 60s film classics like West Side Story and Gypsy, but these days she might be even more famous for her mysterious death in 1981 at the age of 43. If rumors of her husband Robert Wagner's involvement in her drowning off the California coast were spreading around the time of her funeral, they at least didn't spoil the event. Laurence Olivier, Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, Gregory Peck, and Frank Sinatra were in attendance as honorary pallbearers, and actor Roddy McDowall gave a eulogy as he declared, "Wood found not only a way to put life into her art, but art into her life. She has given us a slice of life and serenity."
Natalie Wood was also loved by a world full of audiences, and they too will miss her.
Wood is buried at Westwood Memorial Park in Los Angeles. Her grave is marked by a flat stone with a simple but stylish plaque with reliefs of a rose and a Russian Orthodox cross. The epitaph reads, "More than love," which must have been a phrase that meant a lot to her loved ones, as Wood and Wagner's daughter used it as the title of the biography she wrote about her mother. Omar Sharif looked poised to become a superstar in the 60s after his performances in Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago, but by the mid-70s, his career had essentially stalled out. Still, he lived quite a while longer, passing away at the age of 83 in 2015. At the funeral ceremony held in his home country of Egypt, his countryman and fellow actor Hussein Fahmy noted, "Sharif was a man who loved Egypt and represented the Egyptian art in its best form." A crowd surrounded the Cairo Mosque, hoping to say goodbye to one of their most internationally famous stars ever. Sharif is buried in El Saida Nafisa Cemetery in Cairo, or to be more precise, he's entombed there. His grave is in fact an elaborate sheltered tomb, bright white with gold detailing. 2 flat columns rise up from the sides where his head and feet would be. In keeping with Sharif's Islamic faith, there's also a decorative Arabic script on all 4 sides. There is still a significant cult of personality surrounding Elvis Presley, so you can imagine what it was like when he died in 1977 at the age of 42. Unsurprisingly, the funeral drew a ridiculous crowd. 2 women even reportedly died when an unstable man rammed his car into a group of fans outside Presley's Graceland home, just hours before the king was laid to rest. The singer was originally buried at Forest Hill Cemetery, Midtown in Memphis, Tennessee, although his remains are famously no longer there. Nowadays, if you want to pay homage to the king, you need to go to Graceland, which is also in Memphis. His burial place is center stage, with family members buried alongside him, making a semicircle around a large fountain. There are walking paths as well as huge flower arrangements left by fans, and at the head of his grave is a marble base supporting an eternal flame. A massive slab of marble covers Presley's grave. The plaque on the gravestone takes up almost the whole thing and has an extremely long message written by Elvis's father, part of which reads, "He became a living legend in his own time, earning the respect and love of millions. God saw that he needed some rest and called him home to be with him."
Until we meet you again, may God bless you as he's blessed me. Thank you very much.
Aretha Franklin was known as the Queen of Soul for a reason. In the 60s, she recorded some massive hit songs, including Respect, Think, and Chain of Fools. By the time she died in 2018 at the age of 76, she'd won 18 Grammys and been the first woman inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Franklin was the diva of all divas, and her funeral reflected that. For one thing, it was 8 hours long. It also featured an all-star lineup of performers, including Jennifer Holliday, Stevie Wonder, and Jennifer Hudson. Icons like Cicely Tyson, Clive Davis, and the Reverend Jesse Jackson all spoke, as did former President Bill Clinton. And Tyler Perry was on hand to declare, "I'm grateful to God that we had the fortune to be on this planet at the same time as Aretha Franklin."
And I'm so grateful to God that Aretha walked this earth.
Franklin is interred in Woodlawn Cemetery in Detroit, Michigan. Her crypt is located above 3 other rows, almost touching the ceiling. It's a double crypt, with Franklin centered in gold letters on the marble front and Aretha Louise and her dates set to the left side. Each room of crypts in the mausoleum is styled in a different color of marble, and the singer is in the white room with her father, while 2 of her sisters are nearby in the red room. The 1960s saw Elizabeth Taylor star in some of her most iconic films like Cleopatra and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. When she died in 2011 at the age of 79, there wasn't much time to plan her funeral, as it was held the day after she passed as per Jewish tradition. She converted to Judaism to marry her 4th husband, Eddie Fisher, and still practiced decades later. Taylor is interred in the Great Mausoleum at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. This is basically the place to be laid to rest if you're a Hollywood celebrity. Other icons whose final resting places are within a stone's throw of Taylor's include James Stewart, Clark Gable, Errol Flynn, Humphrey Bogart, and Spencer Tracy. The remains of so many notable people are buried there that Time magazine once called it the New World's Westminster Abbey. Even though Taylor is surrounded by other elaborate crypts, you can't miss her final resting place. It's marked by a virtually life-size statue of a white angel, spreading its wings wide and its arms outstretched. It stands on a large marble plinth with Taylor's name and dates carved in gold, and in the wall behind the angel are the words "In Memoria." Ray Charles won his first Grammy in 1961. Over the course of the ensuing decade, he lived quite the life, which included releasing a country album and getting arrested for heroin possession. Fortunately, he kicked his drug habit and lived until 2004 when he passed away at the age of 73.
If you want to stop smoking, you can quit smoking if you want to.
At Charles's funeral, other stars like B.B. King, Willie Nelson, and Stevie Wonder all performed. Clint Eastwood spoke, as did the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who painted a picture of what Charles might get up to in the afterlife. As he put it, "Now heaven has a maestro. Ray, when you first get there, before you meet Count Basie, before you meet Duke Ellington, before you meet family and friends, there's a man over there across the river who is giving sight to the blind." Charles is interred at Inglewood Park Cemetery in Inglewood, California. His crypt is in the Eternal Love Corridor of the Mausoleum of the Golden West, surrounded by dozens of others, as well as a columbarium wall that holds urns. The white marble face of his crypt is labeled with a simple plaque stating his name and dates. The only nod to his musical career is a small relief of a treble clef on a music staff. There's also a small vase for family and friends to leave floral tributes. Audrey Hepburn had a relatively short career, at least by the standards of Hollywood icons who didn't die at a young age. The 1960s saw her at her pinnacle, as she starred in such classics like My Fair Lady, Sabrina, and Wait Until Dark during that decade. But soon afterwards, she mostly gave up acting, appearing in only 4 more movies in the next 20 years. But there was a good reason for that. Hepburn had found other things that she loved, as she focused on carrying out good deeds. This was evident at her funeral in 1993, where her eulogy was given by Prince Sadruddin Aga Khan, the former United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. He reflected on her work with the organization as he noted, When she went out to the refugee camps, to the squalor of the tents, the mud hovels, think of what she brought to these children. She reached out to them with her smile, with her hands, with her heart.
I've been, so privileged to be given this opportunity to do something for children.
Hepburn is buried at the Cimetière des Tolochenaz in Tolochenaz, Switzerland. She had lived in the country ever since she basically retired from Hollywood in 1967. She has a very traditional grave covered in a large flat stone, marked with a headstone in the shape of a cross, etched with her name and dates. While it may be a difficult location for many of her fans to access, someone is obviously tending to her grave, as images taken through the years show it completely covered with different seasonal flowering plants. Edie Sedgwick might not be super famous in the 21st century, but for a brief shining moment in the 1960s, she was absolutely huge. She met Andy Warhol in the middle of the decade and became his muse, appearing in some of the iconic pop artist's short films. She made headlines in magazine covers in 1965 as she was dubbed a superstar, It Girl, Girl of the Year, and a youth Quaker. But her star burned out quickly. Sedgwick struggled with substance abuse and had a nervous breakdown, as she also attempted suicide at least once. She died of a drug overdose in 1971 at the age of 28. Despite coming from a prominent New England family that had its own burial plot dating back over a century, she wasn't buried along with them or anywhere near them. Instead, she's buried at Oak Hill Cemetery in Ballard, California. A simple stone with her name and dates marks her final resting place. Her epitaph reads simply, wife of Michael Brett Post, even though she was married to Post for only 3 months. If you or anyone you know is struggling with addiction issues, help is available. Visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or contact SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP 4357.